I jolted awake, my eyes snapping open. The mirror in front of me reflected a delicate, flawless face. My own. Between my brows still lingered the restless intensity I had before death. Instinctively, I lowered my gaze, and my eyes fell on the expensive silk robe I was wearing. My slender yet powerful legs were intact. My heart pounded furiously inside my chest, as if it were about to smash through my ribs. Gripping the edge of the vanity with all my strength, I struggled to steady my ragged breathing. I had been reborn to the time before my legs were broken. The screen of my phone lit up silently. It was a message from Ethan, his long familiar tenderness wrapped in words. "When are we going to try on wedding dresses?" I deliberately ignored his text and fixed my eyes on the date. Exactly 3 months remained until the car accident that had changed my fate. Countless images tore through my mind. The crash from my past life, Ethan's betrayal with Jessica and myself, who after losing both legs could never return to the stage, reduced to a pitiful joke worthy only of others' sympathy. My body began to tremble, regret and lingering fear intertwining with the joy of surviving disaster. Taking a deep breath, I swore silently to myself I would never repeat the same mistakes. Thankfully, I was still the dancer admired by all, not yet fallen into ruin. Rising to my feet, I rushed out. With desperate urgency, I mobilized all my connections and funds to hire the most reputable detective agency in the industry. My instructions were clear. Within 3 months, I wanted undeniable evidence of Ethan and Jessica's affair. Photos, videos, hotel records, the clearer the better. Money was no object. Afterward, I returned to my villa. Composed and unhurried on the surface, I walked upstairs toward my mother's and Jessica's rooms. A curious maid spotted me and greeted warmly. "Miss, you're back. Madam went to the spa. She isn't home today." I know. I just came to look for my sheet music," I replied casually before slipping into my mother's room. My gaze swept across the space and landed on a comb with strands of hair tangled in it. In Jessica's room, I took a few strands from her pillow. Carefully, I sealed both samples in separate bags before turning to leave. My heart was tense and pounding with excitement, but my expression remained calm. In my past life, when the truth finally came out that Jessica was an illegitimate daughter, everything had already been too late. I was a cripple, my mother a housewife. We had no power to resist. Other than crying day and night, what else could we do? But this time would be different. Soon, the hair samples were sent to the most authoritative DNA testing center. While waiting for the results, I threw myself into a relentless routine. By day, I poured sweat in the rehearsal hall, refining every arabesque to perfection. By night, I spun under the spotlight on stage after stage. After 4 consecutive hours of performance, blood seeped from my toes, staining my dance shoes red. Memories from my past life clung to me like ghosts. That other version of me, Anna, confined to a wheelchair, imprisoned inside a luxurious but suffocating home, powerless. In endless darkness and tears, I went mad while no one cared. They had driven me insane together, yet accused me of being narrow-minded. What little I had left were scraps of pity, and I couldn't even hold on to my basic dignity. Now I greedily embraced every inch of the stage. I let the pain in my toes remind me, this was real life. I lived only for myself. To hell with love. Commercial performances, competitions, charity galas, I accepted them all. When thunderous applause surged around me, I would close my eyes for an instant during my final bow, letting tears mingle with sweat and fall onto the blazing stage floor. My fellow dancers, who once accused me of being aloof, would never understand. This wasn't about being desperate for money. It was a banquet of rebirth, my indulgence in reclaiming every pirouette, every leap I had missed in my last life, this time, doubled. Yet I also knew with perfect clarity, this engagement was not something I could just walk away from. In my past life, Ethan had played his role far too perfectly. The model fiancé, the dutiful son-in-law, the promising young talent. Everyone thought me, Anna, so blessed to marry him, as if it were fortune earned over 8 lifetimes. Thinking back now, it was almost laughably ironic. Those reporters who praised Ethan, those elders who told me to be patient, those socialites who envied me, all of them ended up laughing at my misery. Since he loved to play the part of the devoted man, then fine. I would act alongside him until the very end, and then I would make sure everyone saw the truth. When his perfect mask was finally torn away, they would all witness the filthy face he had been hiding beneath. So, in the midst of my busy life, I still maintained my relationship with Ethan. I played my role like the most dedicated actress, perfectly imitating a bride-to-be in the throes of love. During candlelit dinners, I pretended not to notice the faint marks on his collar or the sweet perfume clinging to his cuffs. When he leaned close, I even lowered my lashes shyly, just enough to hide the cold disgust in my eyes. Ethan truly did have the perfect face. In the glow of the lights, his deep-set features seemed edged with gold. When he smiled, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes only added to his charm. His long, well-defined fingers always drew soft gasps of envy from socialites whenever they wrapped around my hand. "Anna, you've been different lately," he murmured, rubbing his thumb across my fingers, his voice low and deep. "Have you changed for the better, or for the worse?" I tilted my head and let out a soft laugh, my earrings swaying in scattering flecks of light. "Of course for the better. I've always known how exceptional my Ethan is." His gaze burned into me, but then he let out a faint sigh. "Now you're even more dazzling. I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on to you." It wasn't an empty worry. My tour was packed to capacity, and offers kept flooding in. Even if I softened my tone, even if I leaned close to comfort him, he could feel the sharp edge of the wings I had begun to spread. But in this moment, he was too wrapped up in his own satisfaction to take it seriously. By day, he could spend time with Jessica, and by night, he could hold my hand in public, basking in the envy of others. This master of time management even had the skill to display a convincing tenderness toward me in the midst of his affair. At our engagement party next month, he suddenly lifted my hand and kissed it in front of a chorus of gasps. "Meeting you must have used up all my luck." How ironic. In my past life, that handsome face and those same sweet words had deceived me completely. I had believed him when he said, "Marrying you is my responsibility." Now, watching his performance, all I felt was a headache. Of course, I couldn't say that aloud. I forced my eyes to redden and lean toward his ear, whispering in a soft, trembling voice, "Being able to marry you is all I've ever dreamed of." But in my heart, I repeated the same bitter thought 1,000 times over. I couldn't stop remembering how, in my past life, after everything was exposed, Ethan declared that Jessica was his true love. He claimed he had only married me because of a sense of duty. Jessica excused herself by saying she only wanted to protect my pride, to spare me from being hurt, which was why she had sacrificed and hidden everything for so long. They told me their love had been kept in the dark because of me. And somehow, it was all my fault. But if Ethan had told me the truth from the beginning, with my pride, I would have never stayed with him. How laughable that they believed their charity and love was for my own good. So we carried on with our own hidden agendas for more than half a month. As the wedding day drew closer, the private investigator I had hired worked with astounding efficiency. Before long, a thick brown envelope landed on my desk in my spacious office. The photos inside were crystal clear. Ethan and Jessica were locked in a passionate kiss in the dim corner of an underground parking lot, his hands slipping brazenly under her blouse. Another set of photos showed the two of them in a cheap motel, their entangled silhouettes perfectly visible through the crack in the curtains. There was even a short, blurry video, just clear enough to recognize them. Jessica was straddling Ethan's lap, laughing seductively, her posture vulgar and shameless. I couldn't even describe what I felt. Hatred? Love? The pain had already dulled. All I felt was a hollow pity for the me who had died so miserably in my last life. To put it bluntly, I must have been blind. At the same time, the DNA test results arrived and landed in my drawer. The black and white words cut cruel and clear. Jessica and my mother, Emily, were not biologically related. I nearly laughed aloud. All the fragments now fit together seamlessly, revealing the enormous lie and betrayal that my father William had so carefully hidden for 20 years. But before everything could be set into motion, I couldn't reveal everything too quickly. I needed to endure until every piece was in place, until one decisive blow could end it all. And I was nearly ready. That afternoon, while my father was away on a business trip, and Jessica had used the excuse of going on an outing with friends when in fact she was meeting Ethan, I drove back once again to the James family villa. In the living room, my mother, Emily, was leisurely trimming a pot of rare orchids. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a soft golden glow across her well-kept profile. She wore a fine silk house dress, her expression serene, carrying the air of someone who had lived too long in comfort and distance from the world's struggles. 20 years as a housewife had already worn down the sharp edges of the wealthy heiress who had once defied her family for love. All that remained was the gentle shell of a woman who clung to her husband. "I'm back," I said quietly as I walked over, my voice carefully controlled, carrying a faint trace of tension. She looked up and smiled warmly. "Anna, you're back. Why didn't you go out with Ethan? The wedding is getting close. You should be spending more time together, not just working." "Mom, I have something very important to talk to you about." I sat down across from her, my back straight, my eyes steady as I looked directly at her. "I want to call off the engagement." "What?" The scissors in Emily's hand faltered mid-cut. She stared at me in confusion. "How could you even think that? Ethan is such an outstanding young man. How can you have such an idea? Is it because Jessica has been acting too close to him again? Let me tell you, I used to be jealous too. But men, before marriage they might get a little close to other women. After marriage, it's different. As long as he hasn't truly wronged you, life can go on. Trust me, from someone who's been there, marriage requires tolerance and understanding." I didn't argue. I had expected this exact reaction. In my previous life, she had been completely blinded by Ethan, unable to understand why I wept every day in the James household, unable to understand why her once gentle daughter had become hysterical. She thought I had simply collapsed after losing my legs. She cried for me, night after night, but beyond that, she could do nothing. She knew nothing. This time, I was grateful I still had the chance to tell her the truth. Perhaps one day I would leave this home entirely, leave behind this sorrow. But before that, I wanted to try, at least once, to win over the mother who had loved me since I was a child. Was there any chance she would stand on my side? I pushed the 2 prepared envelopes across the glass coffee table toward her. The brown paper flap was open, the corner of a photo visible inside. The tangled figures of Ethan and Jessica could already be seen. Emily froze, her brows knitting as irritation and confusion flashed across her face at being disturbed. Setting down the silver pruning shears, her well-kept, fair fingers, softened by years of housework, reached for the envelope. She pulled out the one stuffed with photos, and one by one, the shameful images slid onto the gleaming surface of the table, making faint sounds as they landed. Her gaze fell on the first photo. Her pupils contracted violently. All the color drained from her face, leaving her deathly pale. What is this? Anna, where did these pictures come from? Who gave them to you? They must be fake." Her voice rose suddenly, sharp with disbelief and trembling fury. Panicked, she grabbed the photos, her fingers pressing so hard they turned white, as though she could tear the images apart, and with them, the nauseating truth itself. "Mom," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, as sharp and cold as a blade breaking through ice. "The negatives and original files are in my hands. A private investigator took these. Ethan and Jessica, they've been together for a long time." Emily's body shook violently as if struck by a heavy invisible blow. She jerked her head up, her pupils narrowing, her eyes filled with stunned grief and fury. "Jessica, how dare she? That's your fiancé! How could she seduce her own sister's fiancé? And this?" I cut off her frantic, collapsing questions and pointed to the other envelope. My voice was flat, without a ripple. "Look at this one." Emily reached for it as if clinging to a final lifeline, yet at the same time as though she were being dragged into an even deeper abyss. Her trembling hands nearly tore the file from the table. She yanked the papers out roughly, and the bold black conclusion on the DNA report, excluded from a biological mother-daughter relationship, seared into her eyes and her heart like a branding iron. Time froze. She stayed frozen in the posture of looking down at the report, unmoving. The sunlight remained bright, but it could no longer reach the sudden darkness and emptiness in her eyes. At her feet, the orchid she had been trimming shed a single silent leaf. How could this be?" "There's nothing impossible about it," I said coldly. "If you think carefully about the details of her birth, you'll realize something never added up." A jagged, broken laugh tore from her throat, sharp with fury and grief. Yes, yes, of course. She was born prematurely. I never even saw her face before they took her away to the incubator for a week. That must have been it. William James, and Susan. You filthy, shameless pair. You've lied to me for 20 years. The daughter I cherished like the apple of my eye for 20 years, turns out she's just someone else's bastard. Her fingers clenched around the report so tightly that her nails dug into the paper. So that's it. No wonder William spoiled that bastard endlessly. Her grades were always at the bottom. She couldn't even manage the basics of posture. Her piano playing was just noise. And every time I thought it was his overindulgence that ruined her. But all along, it was because she wasn't mine at all. Her voice grew colder with every word. Back then, after William's business grew, he even proposed divorce. I refused, because I couldn't bear the thought of giving up to someone else the man I had abandoned my family for. I swore I would never regret my choice. And in the end, it was only me clinging blindly. I turned myself into nothing more than his dependent. Suddenly, Emily's head snapped up, her face twisted and streaked with tears, eyes blazing with hatred enough to burn the world down. Like a mother beast who had just lost her cub, she snatched up the heavy crystal ashtray at her side and raised it high, ready to smash it against the giant family portrait on the wall. William, with his arms around her and the two girls, smiling with smug satisfaction. I'll kill him. I'll kill them both. I'll go to the company right now and rip William James's face off. Her shrieking voice cracked into hysteria, raw and broken. Watching her in this frenzy, I finally understood why, in my past life, she had lost her mind. Mom! I jumped up and grabbed her raised arm with all my strength, steadying her swaying body. My voice cut through her chaos, sharp and commanding. Calm down. If you go storming off now, what will happen? You'll only tip him off, give him time to destroy the evidence. How will that help us? Do you want to end up like me in my last life? Another woman in this house locked away in the attic, branded a lunatic? I locked my gaze onto her wild, tear-filled eyes and spoke each word like a lash of a whip. Look at yourself. Look at this home. You cut ties with your family for him, poured everything into supporting him. And what did you get in return? His brazen infidelity. His bastard child brought home to replace your real daughter. You've spent 20 years cooking and cleaning, turning yourself into his accessory, a woman who spends money but has no claws, no power. You can't even protect your own daughter. With what, exactly? Are you going to fight him? With what will you rip his face off? Each word struck like a whip against her numbed heart. Her violent movements froze. On her face, wet with tears and hatred, a haze of confusion appeared, followed by an even deeper ache. She looked at her well-kept yet powerless hands, then around at the lavish but hollow living room that felt more like a gilded cage. A crushing sense of helplessness and emptiness swallowed her whole. Then what should we do? Her voice fell, hoarse and trembling with despair. Anna, my child, what are we going to do? My real daughter, where is she? Is she suffering somewhere? The moment my mother thought of that unknown, real daughter somewhere out in the world, her tears surged again. It was the rawest, deepest pain a mother could ever feel. Watching the fragile flame in her eyes, reignited by grief and hatred yet still so weak it could be snuffed out at any moment, I slowly loosened my grip and then clasped her cold, trembling hands tightly in mine. My voice softened, but it carried an undeniable weight. A rational clarity that could not be ignored. Mom, don't be afraid. You have me. We need to take this one step at a time. First, you must stand up again. You have to bow your head and admit your mistakes to Grandpa and Grandma. Ask the Yee family for help. The James Corporation was built with your family's investment. You are already its largest shareholder. Only by taking back what belongs to you and controlling the company will you have the strength to find my sister. Only then will you have the power to make William James and Susan pay for what they've done, instead of sitting here in this gilded cage, crying and screaming, waiting to be slaughtered. Emily looked at me steadily. She saw the daughter she had always been so proud of. But at this moment I seemed like a stranger, like someone who had been through hell and returned, sharpened by the flames. The composure, ruthlessness, and precise calculation in my eyes glimmered like a beacon in the darkness, giving her a fragile sense of direction in the whirlpool of despair. As for Ethan and Jessica, the corner of my lips curled into a cold, humorless smile. I'll help them. I'll let them be the lovers they claim to be. And I'll make sure they're chained to each other forever, under the scorn of everyone, their reputations destroyed. That's the only ending they deserve. Then I lowered my voice, pressing the question straight into her soul. Mom, back then you chose to endure, and what did it bring you? 20 years of lies and the heartbreak of having your daughter switched. Do you really want to force me to follow your path? To knowingly marry a piece of trash like Ethan, the very man responsible for me losing my legs, all for the sake of appearances? Do you want to risk that one day my own child might be switched or abused, hidden in some corner, just like what happened to me? No. Emily's cry was raw and piercing, as though my words had finally ripped away her last shred of hesitation. In that instant, all the doubt and weakness in her eyes burned to ash, replaced by a fierce, desperate resolve. A fire that had been extinguished for 20 years suddenly blazed back to life, glowing with the black light of vengeance. She gripped my hand in return, her strength shocking, her nails biting into my flesh. Her voice no longer trembled, only venom and hatred remained. Daughter, you're right, I was wrong. I've been blind for 20 years. I won't let you walk down my path again. William James, Ethan, Susan, and that bastard child, they owe us, and we will make them pay back 100-fold, 1,000-fold. I'll follow your lead. We'll destroy them together. At that moment, our mother-daughter alliance was forged, sealed in blood, tears, and betrayal. Once Emily made up her mind, she wasted no time. She cast aside 20 years of pride and guilt and personally returned to the Yi family estate. She bowed her head before her father and mother, the same elders who had nearly cut ties with her back then. In the ancestral hall, kneeling on the cold brick floor, her back straight, she laid out everything clearly. William's betrayal, the crime of switching her daughter, and the financial irregularities he had hidden within the company. I've investigated, she said, her voice steady. He has a trust overseas worth $2.8 billion, embezzled directly from company funds. The only beneficiaries are Jessica's parents. Her words hit the hall like thunder. The teacup in my grandfather's hand shattered on the floor. Shock and fury filled the room, but behind it all was the deep aching pain for the once beloved youngest daughter who had wasted 20 years. Yet even so, not all was lost. Perhaps, in the heavens, this had been arranged as another kind of investment. Now it was time for the Yi family to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The James Corporation had fattened enough over the past few years, and whether for blood ties or for profit, the Yi family could not resist the chance. Their massive family machine roared to life without resistance. Capital, connections, expert auditors, and legal teams quietly began infiltrating the empire William James had built with Yi family money and influence. When Emily returned from her family's estate, Emily no longer lost herself in flower arranging, shopping trips, or simmering soup in the kitchen. She put on her long-neglected business suits, her gaze sharp as a blade. Every morning she left early and came home late, and with the support of her cousins in the Yi family, she began ruthlessly cutting away William James's influence inside the company. Quietly, she shifted core assets and client resources under her own control. William knew nothing concrete, yet he sensed the storm gathering over the company, and sensed, too, the unfamiliar change in his wife. Honey, am I not treating you well enough? Why can't you just stay home? You're always out there parading yourself, making me look incompetent. His half-serious anger rang hollow. Really? If the company is doing so well, Emily replied with feigned casualness as she exposed a few contract pages, then I suppose I'll reject these coastal land projects. William's eyes lit up instantly. You can secure the coastal land? His earlier rage deflated, and he quickly replaced it with a smile. Coupled with his polished demeanor, he once again wore the mask of the perfect, charming husband. Wouldn't it be too hard on you to negotiate? The chairman's wife there is an old acquaintance of mine. Shouldn't we arrange for her instead? While Emily maneuvered within the company, I led my troupe to one victory after another. I became the Vienna Golden Ballet's very first Chinese principal dancer, winning international acclaim. My constant traveling for performances gave Ethan and Jessica all the opportunity they needed, So much that Jessica soon became pregnant. For me, that only meant stronger evidence. Ethan, of course, was pleased with my busy schedule. It gave him more freedom. Still, he sometimes grumbled that I didn't spend enough time with him. My disgust for him ran bone deep, but I refused to bear the weight of blame. A few tender words, a soft confession of love, and he was easily coaxed back into contentment. Outwardly, I continued to play the devoted fiancé, brimming with anticipation for our engagement. Whenever I faced Ethan, my smiles stayed sweet, my gaze filled with affection, more obedient and gentle than I had been in my past life. I accepted every date invitation, held his hand tightly in public, and let the reporters photograph us, flooding the media with the image of a perfect match made in heaven. Anna, do you really love me? One evening, after dinner, Ethan drove me home. In the car, he asked cautiously, his eyes probing me, as if trying to catch the faint chill beneath my flawless mask. After all, I was shining too brightly now, too strong, too out of reach. Even the smallest trace of indifference unsettled him. A man of pride, he couldn't stand the idea of a woman outshining him, and I wasn't nearly as clingy as he wanted me to be. Inside I sneered, but on my face, the perfect blend of shyness and worry appeared. I leaned gently on his shoulder, my voice soft with dependence. Maybe it's just pre-wedding nerves. Ethan, I'm scared. Scared I won't be a good wife. Scared of losing you. You're so amazing, and so many women admire you. If I don't make myself better, how could I ever hold on to your heart? I paused just long enough, then looked up at him, my lashes trembling as though damp with tears. You won't leave me, will you? My words inflated his vanity like a balloon. He immediately wrapped me tightly in his arms, rubbing his chin against my hair, swearing with all the passion he could muster. Silly girl, how could I ever? No matter what, I'll love you. Always. Forever. His oath rang with such conviction, his gaze so tender it could drown someone alive. As if he weren't the same man who, in my past life, had looked at my crippled body with disgust. I believe you, I murmured into his chest, my voice muffled with apparent trust. But my fingers tightened silently at my side. Ethan, I'll remember your promise. Soon, everyone will see just how cheap your vows are. At last, the day I had chosen so carefully arrived. Ethan's multinational corporation was celebrating the successful signing of a major international project, a banquet that also served as the climax of the publicity for our engagement. Crystal chandeliers lit the ballroom like daylight as Ethan, in his custom suit, escorted me through the crowd, tall and polished at my side. The diamonds on Ethan's tie shimmered in harmony with my earrings, the flashes of the reporters' cameras freezing us as the perfect cover couple for any business magazine. This merger owes much to Director Ethan, the president of a bank said, raising his champagne glass. Miss James, you're truly fortunate. I curved my lips into a faint smile, my fingertips gently pinching Ethan's arm. He immediately leaned down and whispered something playful in my ear, drawing warm laughter from the surrounding guests. The cameras caught the gesture perfectly, and also captured the faint lip mark hidden at his collar, a peach-colored kiss Jessica had left him that very morning. In the corner, Jessica clutched her fifth martini, her eyes red-rimmed. She had chosen a champagne-colored gown almost identical to mine, though mine was haute couture straight from the runway, while hers was clearly a hastily altered off-season design. Every time someone glanced at us with envy, her slender fingers tightened nervously around the stem of her glass. Anna. She suddenly stumbled forward, her voice slurred, wine and jasmine perfume clinging to her breath. I feel a little dizzy. Ethan? Instinctively, Ethan reached to steady her by the waist, then recoiled as if shocked, his Adam's apple bobbing, sweat breaking out at his temples. I nearly laughed aloud. How wonderful. The so-called invincible lovers, scurrying like rats in the gutter, couldn't even bear to touch in public light. I'll take her to the lounge, I said gently, slipping an arm under my sister. At her ear, in a whisper only she could hear, I murmured, how pitiful. If you love him so much, why don't I help you both step into the spotlight? Her body froze stiff. I, meanwhile, turned with a soft, apologetic smile for the guests. The cameras flashed again, capturing the touching image of the James family's eldest daughter tenderly supporting her tipsy younger sister. But before we had even walked 2 steps, the accident I had arranged unfolded. a notorious paparazzi studio known for explosive scandals, simultaneously detonated a headline video across every major social platform. Shocking. Dancer Anna James's fiancé, CEO Ethan, caught cheating with her younger sister Jessica. The heiress sisters in a sordid love triangle. Clicking the link revealed a carefully edited but unmistakably damning compilation. Ethan and Jessica kissing passionately in a dim corner, their intimate silhouettes behind the curtains of a five-star hotel, even a clip clear enough to show Jessica's profile and Ethan's back as they arrived on a bed. In one shot, Jessica straddled him, her voice syrupy and obscene. "Brother-in-law, between me and my sister, who do you want more?" Ethan's flushed, lustful face filled the screen in humiliating close-up. The internet exploded instantly. "Ethan cheats with fiancé's sister," shot straight to the top of trending searches, marked with a blazing red icon. The comment sections collapsed into chaos. "Holy crap, scandal of the year. This scumbag looks so perfect on the surface, and behind the scenes he's sleeping with his fiancé's sister? Jessica is Anna's real sister, right? My God, even rabbits don't eat grass at their own burrow. This is disgusting. Poor Anna, our ballet goddess, so talented, betrayed by both her fiancé and her own sister. The entertainment circle is filthier than I thought. To have this blow up the night before the engagement, it's a dagger to the heart. How big will her trauma be? Can this wedding even go on?" At first, only an odd stir rippled through the banquet hall as a few rich second-generation heirs huddled over their phones, gasping dramatically. Then Mrs. Lin, the CEO's wife of Lin Corporation, strode swiftly across the room in her 10-centimeter heels. As she bent to whisper into the ear of the chairman, his silver fork clattered onto his plate with a sharp clang. The atmosphere shifted like a plague spreading through the room. Shock, contempt, glee, pity, all eyes turned as one, stabbing like 1,000 needles at the stage where Ethan stood, his face pale as paper, and at the corner below, where Jessica sat frozen, her expression twisted in shame as though she wished the ground would swallow her whole. Most entertaining of all was Ethan's expression. First a flushed, liver-colored red, then drained to a corpse's pallor, and finally settling into an ashen gray that was almost beautiful in its collapse. His gaze darted across the crowd and locked onto me, his pupils trembling violently, begging, pleading, sending a desperate signal for rescue. How amusing. Did he actually still think I would save him? The photographers noticed instantly, their lenses whipping toward me in unison. A forest of cameras focused on where I stood, still as a statue, like a beautiful sculpture from which the soul had just been ripped away. The careful makeup I had applied could not hide the sudden bloodless pallor of my cheeks. My body went rigid, then began to tremble uncontrollably. My empty gaze fixed on the man on stage, a man who suddenly seemed utterly unfamiliar, and in my eyes swelled disbelief, a tearing pain so immense it left me lost. My lips parted slightly as if voicing a silent why. And then, under the scrutiny of everyone present, great shimmering tears spilled from my eyes, falling quietly down my pale cheeks like strings of broken pearls. No screams, no hysteria, only a silence so absolute it was the purest expression of heartbreak after total ruin. My wordless tears carried more weight than any accusation ever could. The hall fell deathly still. Even the sound of camera shutters stopped for a moment. All were shaken by the sheer devastation etched across my face. The next instant, as though I could no longer withstand the crushing blow, my body swayed violently and collapsed backward. A companion gasped, rushing to catch me. "Anna!" Ethan's strangled cry burst from the stage. He instinctively tried to rush down to hold me, nearly knocking over the champagne tower. Crystal glasses shattered on the ground, fragments scattering like sparks. How fitting, I thought bitterly. The show is over and still you come to disturb me. Very well. I'll give you a burial in madness to mark the end. I raised my tear-blurred face, mustering all my strength to slowly, despairingly shake my head, at him and at every camera lens trained upon us. "We're done. The engagement is off." "Anna, please, let me explain." Ethan finally caught me in his arms, his tie askew around his neck. "This is a misunderstanding. Someone is trying to hurt us." I looked at the veins bulging at his temple, and suddenly laughed. The sound froze him in place, like prey realizing too late that the gentle trap concealed sharp fangs. My hand snapped up, delivering a sharp slap across his face. My manicured nails carved 3 bloody scratches into his skin. He stared in shock, and I wrenched free from his grasp. Straightening my swaying figure into a blade of resolve, I strode forward, the fishtail hem of my gown sweeping across broken glass and spilled champagne. Each step landed in the silence of the crowd. Amid flashing lights and countless complicated gazes, I walked slowly but unyieldingly out of that hall filled with lies and betrayal. At the door, I tore off the diamond earrings and tossed them into a trash bin. Those global limited editions had been bought by Ethan in Milan last month, during one of his trysts with Jessica. Now, like their so-called love, they were nothing more than cheap counterfeits. Outside the revolving doors, my driver had already opened the car door. The night wind swept ginkgo leaves around my feet. I looked back one last time at the blazing lights of the ballroom. By sunrise tomorrow, some people would forever live in the shadows, and my name would be etched into every headline. Not as the villain, but as the flawless victim. This time, I would no longer be condemned by the world. Public opinion would be wholly on my side, and explode it did. Ethan's carefully crafted image of the promising young executive and ideal man collapsed overnight. He became the century's most reviled scumbag. Jessica fared no better, branded a calculating, backstabbing green tea sister. Her status as the James family's second daughter brought no protection. It only fueled harsher scorn. The Ethan family household descended into chaos. His father raged, and his mother, Christine, nearly suffered a heart attack, weeping and screaming. How could you? How could you do such a thing? What's wrong with Anna? Who is that Jessica anyway? Aside from her face, what does she have? She couldn't even get into college. You've shamed the entire family. Ethan, desperate and frantic, tried to reach me with explanations, apologies, begging to make amends. Calls, texts, even showing up outside my building. All of it met only cold rejection. My bodyguards turned him away, and I blocked every line of contact. 3 days later, with my studio's PR team working behind the scenes, I chose the perfect moment to open my personal social media account. I went live. No dazzling makeup, no glamorous gown. Just my bare face, pale under the sunlight, my dark circles stark, my frame fragile and wan like someone recovering from a grave illness. The number of viewers skyrocketed to terrifying levels in seconds. I did not cry. My voice was hoarse from being pressed down, calm yet sorrowful in a way that pierced deeper than wailing ever could. Hello everyone. I'm Anna James. I believe you all know what has happened these past few days. I'm sorry to take up public attention in this way. These past few days had been the darkest, most agonizing of my life. To be betrayed by the man I trusted most and by the sister I had cherished most, the pain was beyond words. On camera, my eyes stared blankly ahead, as if I had lost focus entirely, my lashes trembling ever so slightly. The image was heartbreakingly beautiful. What happened had already happened. No amount of blame or resentment could change the truth. The only thing I could be thankful for was that I saw it all clearly before the engagement. Even though the cost was unbearably cruel. I paused, drawing a deep breath, as though it took everything in me to push out the words that followed. Each one rang sharp and clear. Feelings can't be forced, since Ethan and Jessica truly love each other. My voice caught, my throat tightening. I had to stop for several seconds, suppressing the overwhelming pain before I could continue. Then I'll step aside. I'll give them my blessing. I wish them happiness. The instant I said it, a large tear fell heavily onto the back of my hand. I quickly ducked my head and wiped it away, but the camera had already magnified that fleeting fragility, that forced endurance, making the sorrow look even sharper. The livestream erupted into madness. The comments flooded across the screen like a tsunami. Sister, don't cry. My heart is breaking for her. She's too kind, actually blessing them after what they did. They don't deserve her. Trash couple. Anna is so strong. This is what a true goddess looks like, graceful, dignified, letting go even while hurt. Ethan and Jessica, come out and face us. Look what you've done to her. Anna, don't be sad. You deserve someone so much better. That livestream pushed my image as the magnanimous, selfless victim to its peak. My followers skyrocketed. Countless strangers became fans overnight. Public attention exploded and my commercial value soared. More importantly, the entire internet was heartbroken for me and furious at that shameless pair. My one line, "I give them my blessing," left Ethan completely cornered, with nowhere to escape. When Jessica showed up at the Ethan house clutching a positive pregnancy test, Ethan's mother smashed her teacup in fury. "And that tramp thinks she's fit to join our family?" But online outrage was far worse. Under the trending tag "world-class scumbag," the Ethan Corporation's stock fell for 3 consecutive days. The board issued an ultimatum. In the end, for the sake of the family's reputation and the company's survival, Ethan gave in. He finally married the woman he claimed was his true love, Jessica. The wedding was held in extreme low profile, even carrying a trace of humiliation. In the Lotus Hall of the Marriott Hotel, Jessica walked in dragging a gown with an overlong train. The crooked stitching at the waistline reminded her bitterly of the day she failed her college entrance exam. Her sister's acceptance letter had been just as blinding as her own failing grades. Ethan stood by the champagne tower, his soul vacant. The custom-tailored suit on his body looked more like it had been rented. During the ring exchange, his eyes kept flickering toward the door, his fingertips betraying resistance. Jessica suddenly recalled their first promise to each other. It had been after one of my celebration banquets. He had told her the only person he truly loved was her. "Please cut the cake," someone prompted. The 3-tiered cake leaned unevenly, sugar flowers sagging like one of her botched home economics assignments. Ethan's mother wiped her wrist furiously with a wet towel where Jessica had brushed against her, disgust plain on her face. The guests whispered, their mocking words slipping into Jessica's ears. "She's nowhere near her sister's level. She'll never make it onto a proper stage." The clinking of champagne glasses resounded, and Jessica clenched her bouquet tightly. She couldn't understand how it had come to this. Sister, always sister. I could never outshine her. She was always better, always more dazzling. Even after I had someone I loved because he was tied to her, we could only sneak around in the shadows. But was that really so wrong? If their affair had never been exposed, Jessica thought, she had already resigned herself to loving him silently her whole life, with no name and no status, yielding him to me in public. Now, she no longer had to endure. And yet, why didn't it feel like happiness? After the wedding, things only worsened. Ethan's mother couldn't hide her loathing for the daughter-in-law who had destroyed her perfect match, dragged her son's name through the mud, and forced her way into the family by getting pregnant. Disgust seeped into every bone of the Ethan family. All of their anger and disappointment poured onto Jessica. "Look at this food you made. Is this slop for pigs? You're not even worth a single finger of Anna. All you do is sit around giggling at your phone." At her age, Anna had already won countless international awards. And you? Useless. You buy all these clothes, but can you earn a cent? All you do is waste my son's money. Lazy parasite, are you even looking for a job? What good are you to the Ethan family? Jessica's once prized innocence and carefree simplicity had turned into fatal flaws under the daily grind of cooking, chores, and a sharp-tongued, demanding mother-in-law. She couldn't cook. She couldn't manage a household. She had no idea how to please a shrewd matriarch. Every attempt to defend herself was met with sharper curses from Christine and Ethan's increasingly impatient shouts. "Can't you just say less? Can't you put up with it? Mom isn't in good health." Jessica froze, as though seeing the man she loved for the very first time. He was actually siding with his mother against her. In truth, Ethan's life was no better. His standing in the company plummeted. The superiors, who once treated him with favor, now looked at him with suspicion. Demoted, stripped of key projects, he watched as his siblings snatched the resources that had once belonged to him. Colleagues whispered behind his back without end. Failure at work. Endless battles between his wife and mother at home, Jessica's constant complaints and tears. Together they exhausted him, wore his temper raw, when yet another argument ended with Ethan shoving Jessica so hard she fell. The child, the fragile thread barely holding this twisted marriage together, was lost. Ethan's fury finally erupted. He glared at Jessica weeping on the hospital bed, shrieking accusations at him and his mother. Years of bottled resentment and frustration drowned out his reason. "Shut up, you lunatic. If you hadn't seduced me, how would I have ended up like this? How would I have lost Anna?" Like a raging beast, he lunged and struck her hard across the face. The The crack of the slap echoed through the ward. Jessica clutched her cheek, stunned, before breaking into a harsher, more desperate wail. Christine jumped at her son's violence, but as she watched Jessica sobbing in misery, she felt a grim satisfaction. All right. A couple of slaps to vent is enough. Don't go too far. Don't cause a death. It's bad luck. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, staring at Jessica, her face streaked with snot and tears, her hair tangled, her eyes burning with poisonous hatred. In that moment, the image of Anna returned to him, always graceful, radiant, untouchable. The crushing contrast, the regret, chewed at his heart like a venomous snake. With a roar, he slammed the door and left the room, abandoning the wreckage and Jessica's hopeless cries behind him. Alone, drained in body and spirit, Jessica lay on the cold hospital bed, scrolling her phone for comfort. But the news that flooded her screen was a fatal blow. Ballet goddess Anna James stuns the world, winner of the top prize at the International Ballet Competition. Anna James dazzles Lausanne, the Eastern Swan Reborn. Exclusive interview, Anna James, dance is my only salvation. Attached were high-definition photos of me on the world's greatest stage. Under the spotlight, I wore a pure white ballet dress, my figure tall and proud like a swan. Every leap and spin radiated strength and elegance. My eyes shone bright, filled with confidence and life, like a phoenix reborn from fire, too dazzling to behold. In the interview clip, I smiled at the camera. My voice was calm, open. Yes, I went through some things, but dance helped me find myself again. It showed me that a woman's true worth isn't in who she depends on, but in who she becomes. Those words landed like the sharpest slap, striking Jessica across the face and striking every person watching the scandal unfold. Jessica's eyes locked onto the glowing figure on screen, as if I stood on clouds looking down on the world. Then she lowered her gaze to her own body wrapped in bandages, her greasy hair falling across her face. The thin, faded hospital gown clung to her body, the cold, oppressive ward filled with malice pressing down on her. A torrent of rage and unwillingness erupted like magma, burning away the last remnants of her reason. Jessica let out a shrill, inhuman scream and hurled her phone against the wall. The screen shattered instantly, just like her crumbling life. Anna, it's you. You ruined me. I'll never let you go. At that very moment, an even more devastating piece of news arrived. The James family had completely fallen. William James was dragged into court by Emily on charges of bigamy, hiding marital assets, and embezzlement. Backed fully by the Yee family, Emily had long since stripped him of all power. Overnight, the once glorious CEO William James was disgraced. The company collapsed into bankruptcy, his personal assets frozen, and he now faced prison time. What broke Jessica entirely was Emily presenting the DNA report in open court, denying Jessica's status as a James daughter. In one night, Jessica fell from the second daughter of the James family to nothing more than the bastard child of William and Susan, the illegitimate evidence of an affair. She became a public joke. Her footing in the Ethan household crumbled completely. Christine's curses only grew sharper. You curse bringer. Ever since you came into this house, nothing has gone right for us. Get out. Get out of my home. Ethan's eyes on her were nothing but raw disgust and exhaustion, as though looking at filth. He stopped coming home at night, and when he did, he often beat her, spitting crazy woman at her again and again. How could this happen? Why did it turn out this way? Jessica's despair and hatred burned hotter, but for now she knew she had to return to her family home and figure things out. She couldn't stay with the Ethans any longer. She refused to accept it. Hadn't she been the one her parents loved for over 20 years? How could she suddenly become an illegitimate child? She was the victim. The James family owed her. She would go back. She would find her father, her mother, her sister. She would demand answers. She would make them feel guilty. She would force them to compensate her. Jessica had little money saved, but she grabbed a cab straight to the James family estate, where she had lived for 20 years. The car pulled up before the familiar carved iron gates. The mansion that once symbolized her status now looked chilling under the setting sun. She banged on the door, screaming, her voice raw. "Open up! Open the door! Dad! Mom! Anna!" The heavy pounding echoed through the gate. A servant's wary face flickered behind the crack, then the door opened. Jessica stumbled inside, bringing in the cold night air with her, a pitiful wreck of a figure barging into the splendid cage she once called home. The living room was ablaze with light, bright as day. Suitcases lined the floor, ready for departure. Emily stood near the butler, giving low, efficient instructions, her manner once again sharp and decisive. Beside me stood my real sister, Chloe, thin and delicate, but standing straight. She whispered something softly, her clear eyes full of both caution and curiosity, still unaccustomed to the grandeur around her. In the corner, William slumped in the shadows of the sofa, his face ashen, looking like a discarded ornament. The scene stabbed at Jessica's eyes. She stopped in the foyer, her shrill voice cutting through the warm air. "What are you doing?" Her gaze was like a drowning person clutching at driftwood, only to find it was thorns. Finally, her eyes locked onto Chloe, and she choked out, aggrieved beyond words. "Who is he? Why is he here? Dad, Mom, Anna, don't you want me anymore? Are you throwing me away for a stranger?" Her voice grew more hysterical, demanding, spoiled. But in the next second, as she finally recognized Chloe's face, her pupils shrank sharply. Her arrogance froze, collapsing into a shock like seeing a ghost. The air tightened. Chloe's body stiffened, her bright eyes darkening, the humiliation and pain I had once seen in her photos surfacing in waves. Emily sensed it instantly and squeezed Chloe's hand tighter. Jessica's fleeting shock twisted into something darker, fear, laced with malice. Thief. Hillbilly. Jessica tried to arm herself with malice, her hand lifting to strike the so-called imposter. A sharp crack split the air, far harsher than anyone expected. Chloe had seized Jessica's wrist and struck her back, hard enough to send her stumbling into a side cabinet. Half her face swelled instantly, blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. She looked like a broken, discarded doll. Clutching her cheek, Jessica screamed in disbelief. She knew this girl. She had been that quiet classmate, the niece of Aunt Shen, the one she used to shove down and force to be her stool at school. And yet she was the real daughter of her mother? How could it be? Back then, when she bullied her, Chloe hadn't seemed strong at all. Chloe drew her hand back, her fingers trembling slightly, but her spine stood straight. Her voice was as cold and sharp as a blade. "That slap was for the textbooks you tore, the dirty water you poured on my uniform, the locked stall doors. Jessica, look closely. You are the real thief in this house, and my name is Chloe Ye." Her words were steady, though I could sense a flicker of unease beneath them. She glanced at me and at Mom, seeking reassurance. This scene was nothing like the recognition of my past life. Back then, Father still held all the power. Even after finding his real daughter, he showed only favor toward Jessica, and nothing but disdain for Chloe. Her days at home had been miserable. But now, Chloe had me and Mom standing firmly behind her. Having struck Jessica and then seeing the sure nods of support from us, Chloe held her ground with even greater confidence. The shyness vanished from her face, replaced by the pride of someone who finally knew she belonged. Jessica broke down completely. The mother and sister who had once loved her didn't take her side at all. She remembered how she used to resent us, how we pushed her to study, planned her career, seemed so strict. She had always preferred her father, who indulged her every whim, who never scolded her, who took her eating and playing. But now, compared to the coldness of Mom and me, even harsher than before, she couldn't adjust. Fear gnawed at her, so she threw herself into the arms of the only person left to her, her father. William held his weakened daughter, his face full of pity. He wanted to defend his illegitimate child, but when he met our eyes, his voice faltered. He had always bullied the weak and feared the strong, and even with his own daughter he was no exception. Seeing her father was useless, Jessica changed tactics. She hurled insults, pleaded, sputtered excuses, but her arrogance was gone. As she drew closer to Chloe again, Mom stepped forward, shielding Chloe completely behind her. Her voice wasn't loud, but it rang steady and firm. "Every wound on Chloe's body, you had a hand in them. Very good. Jessica, your grades were poor because you spent your days seducing classmates, playing mistress instead of studying. I should have known. You really aren't my child." Tears welled in her eyes, but her tone was unshakable. "Throw her out." The bodyguard stepped in and dragged Jessica out like a sack of garbage. Her howls and curses were cut off by the heavy carved iron doors. William made a feeble move to stop them, but in the end, he did nothing. The door slammed with a dull boom. Inside, the lights still glowed warm and bright. Outside, night had fallen, black as ink, the cold cutting to the bone. An outsider, a mistake, had been shut out of our lives forever. Jessica collapsed on the icy ground, her cheeks stinging from Chloe's hand, her heart seething with confusion and boundless hate. She felt only the despair of being abandoned by the entire world. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to call home. Lost and broken, she wandered the streets. Suddenly, a name came to her mind. Her biological mother, the forbidden name in the James household. Susan. She remembered seeing Aunt Shen at school before, that gentle, beautiful woman who often gave her gifts and took her out to play. So she was father's true love? If this woman really was her mother, then surely she would help her. Clutching at what felt like her last lifeline, Jessica turned toward that thought. Jessica carried what little she had left and slipped into the night to search for her birth mother. She didn't know that Susan had already vanished, fleeing with stolen money when William's empire collapsed, leaving no trace behind. Jessica's journey to find her was doomed from the start. Another road into despair. After countless twists and turns, she finally tracked down a luxury complex in the city, only to be scolded by the property manager. The house had been sold long ago, and no one knew where Susan had gone. Her last hope shattered, Jessica collapsed in the cold stairwell, despair coiling around her like a venomous snake. Ethan's fists, Christine's curses, the pain of her miscarriage, her mother's abandonment, all of it pushed her to the edge of breaking. Even Aunt Shen had left her. Even she didn't want her. Why was heaven so cruel? Why did Anna have everything, never sparing even a scrap of happiness for her? Huddled in a cheap motel, Jessica stared into the mirror at her pale, haggard face streaked with tears. Her hands shook as she picked up a shard of broken glass, ready to end her life. But a knock at the door stopped her. Outside stood a man in a tailored suit, refined and handsome. Liam Moore. "Miss James," he said warmly, "perhaps I could buy you a coffee? You look like you could use some help." His deep eyes held just the right trace of sympathy. Jessica's heart jolted. She knew him. He was the gentle editor she had met years ago while studying abroad after failing her college entrance exams. The charming older man she had once admired. What was he doing here? Forgetting her wretched state, she instinctively leaned toward him. At least she still had her face. To Jessica, Liam's sudden arrival was like driftwood to a drowning soul, the only beam of light cast into her abyss. He brought her back to his sunlit penthouse apartment. His slender fingers pushed a steaming mug of cocoa toward her. "Your sister's perfection," he said smoothly, "is nothing but a polished mask. Too fake. You at least feel real, alive, human." Jessica stared at the gleam of his cufflinks. Then Liam suddenly pulled out an old journal from a drawer, the keepsake he had once given her during those years abroad, still containing her early drafts. "Jessica, are you still writing?" She froze, remembering her forgotten dream. Clenching her jaw, she nodded. "I want to tell my story. Maybe I can be admired like my sister. Maybe I can surpass her." With Liam's encouragement, Jessica wrote listening to the spring rain. In the book, she cast herself as a pure, romantic girl yearning for love, caught between several outstanding men, gaining both fame and affection. But there was also a disabled, malicious sister, a brother-in-law, and a rustic impostor of a younger sister, all conspiring to ruin her. In the end, she triumphed over all the villains and lived happily ever after with the finest of the male leads. The plot was melodramatic, but the writing was detailed, painfully immersive, infused with Jessica's turbulent experiences and the melancholy of early youth literature. In an era that worshipped love above all else, it quickly became popular. Liam published the novel under his company and loudly promoted it. With aggressive marketing, the book exploded in success. At the press conference for her new release, Jessica appeared in designer clothes, leaning sweetly against Liam's side, smiling brightly. During interviews, she deliberately emphasized true love is priceless, breaking free from shackles to be reborn, and that some women, though glamorous, were never loved by any man, making them worthless. The insinuation toward me and Ethan was clear. Liam took the chance to wrap an arm around her waist and publicly declare their love, even announcing plans to adapt her novel into a film. For Jessica, life finally seemed to turn around. "See, Anna," she thought smugly. "I'm not useless." I'll write story after story, and in them I'll expose you. But William's downfall came even faster than anyone expected. One cold, damp evening, a mud-streaked old car rolled up to the ornate iron gates of the private estate where Mom and I lived, hidden in the mountains. The door opened, and out stepped William. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, his former elegance and vigor gone. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his hair half-turned white. His steps were unsteady, dragging, and behind him staggered Ethan, just as gaunt and gray, his face unshaven, his eyes dulled. Yet in those hollow eyes flickered a greedy, desperate hunger, as he stared toward the brightly lit, European-style mansion deep within the estate. It was as if he wanted to pierce through the trees, the distance, to glimpse the figure that haunted him, the woman who consumed both his longing and regret. William James drew in a long, shaky breath and pressed the cold doorbell. His voice came through the intercom, hoarse, broken, laced with a begging sob. "Daughter, Emily, please open the door. For the sake of what we once had, please save the James Corporation. We're truly at the end of the road." On the screen, the butler's face appeared, blank and unmoved. "Sorry, Miss Anna and Mrs. Emily are not receiving visitors." "Wait, please wait." William panicked, shoving Ethan forward. "Anna, look, it's Ethan. I knew you loved him most, so I brought him here for you. He knows he was wrong. He regrets everything. He was blinded by temptation, but in his heart, he has always only loved you. Give him a chance to apologize in person. Please, listen to him." Shoved to the gate, Ethan seemed to awaken from a daze. He flung himself against the iron bars, gripping them tightly as his voice cracked in the night, full of despair, tinged with a false sincerity that he almost believed himself. Anna, listen to me. I was wrong, I know. I regret everything. Every single day, every single night, I've lived in remorse. I never loved her. The one I've always loved, it's you, Anna, only you. Please, for the sake of everything we had, forgive me just once. Give me another chance. From now on, I'll listen to everything you say. Please, Anna. His voice echoed along the empty mountain road, raw with pleading, tearing at the silence. On the wide second-floor balcony of the mansion, I stood quietly, cradling a warm cup of fruit tea. The late autumn wind carried a chill, brushing against my carefully kept hair. I wore a custom cashmere gown, soft and expensive. Inside the estate, light and warmth glowed. Outside the gates, father and son wallowed in ruin. We lived in two utterly separate worlds. Behind me, I heard my mother's steps. She joined me, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, clearly just finished with an important video meeting. She glanced toward the gate, her eyes cold, touched with the faintest sneer. Clowns. I swirled my tea, watching the rising steam blur into the air. I didn't speak. The cries and pleas from below reached us faintly, as though through thick glass, muffled, distant, meaningless. My mother tilted her head toward me, her gaze probing. "Anna, do you want me to?" I set the cup down. The porcelain clinked crisply against the glass table. My lips curved slowly into a smile without warmth, sharp as ice. "Butler." My voice carried steady and clear through the intercom. "It's too noisy outside. Please tell them to leave." "Yes, miss," came the butler's respectful reply. Moments later, the heavy side gate cracked open. Two towering bodyguards stepped out, carrying a large bucket. Hope flared in William and Ethan's eyes. They thought we had relented. "Anna, I knew." Ethan stepped forward, his face alight with desperate joy. But the bucket tipped, and a rush of icy water crashed down over their heads, soaking them through, dousing every last shred of their illusion. The pour was merciless, deliberate, precise. The bucket of ice-cold water drenched William and Ethan from head to toe. The late autumn wind cut through them, making their bodies tremble violently, teeth chattering uncontrollably. Their hair and once expensive suits, already worn and shabby, clung wet and heavy against their skin, leaving them looking like two miserable, soaked strays. Ethan let out a short, involuntary cry. Shock and anger twisted his face, his lips turning purple from the cold as he pointed at the bodyguards, too furious to form words. The bodyguards set the empty bucket down, their tone flat and mechanical, like men carrying out orders. "Gentlemen, please leave. If you continue to linger, next time it won't just be water." Without another glance, they turned and shut the side gate with a heavy thud. The icy water seeped down Ethan's face, his neck, into his clothes. He shook uncontrollably, but the bodyguard's words stung far more than the water. That humiliation pierced deeper than the cold. Anna. She truly wasn't the same woman who had once loved him as if her life depended on it. She was untouchable now, the radiant queen of ballet, the mistress of this grand estate. And he? In her eyes, he had become nothing but filth, unworthy of even a glance. A tidal wave of regret and despair swallowed him whole. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the wet ground with a dull splash. Muddy water seeped through his trousers, soaking his knees, drowning the last shred of his pitiful dignity. He looked up toward the brightly lit mansion, tears spilling unchecked. His sobs tore through the silence of the mountain road, raw, desolate, filled with too late repentance that no one would ever care to hear. It was then that his phone buzzed with an anonymous email. Inside was a video of Jessica and Liam Moreau flaunting their love in public. Jessica had published several books by now, and her latest was already being adapted into a film. The promotional clips stirred public chatter once again, prompting people to revisit the tangled story of the two sisters. Public opinion shifted. People naturally sided with the weaker one, never bothering to question whether she was truly innocent. Months after Jessica had left the Yates family, Ethan's first glimpse of her came through this email, a video of her at a book launch, leaning tenderly against Liam as he adjusted her earrings. How ironic. Once, he had betrayed Anna by sneaking stolen kisses with Jessica in dim hallways. Now, from that same angle, another man was tenderly caring for Jessica, while Ethan was cast aside. So this was what betrayal felt like. So raw, so gutting. Anna had once loved him so deeply, she must have endured pain he could barely imagine. Obsessed, Ethan began searching Jessica's name online, only to find that she had spread slander about Anna in interviews and novels, claims of chaotic private life, whispers that Anna had suppressed younger talent with her family's influence. The cover of Jessica's book Whispers in the Rain was emblazoned with the words, "Based on a true story," revealing the rot behind the glamour. The top review sneered, "Imagine if Anna saw this, she'd be furious." Ethan's rage boiled over. He had lost his job, his parents had fallen ill, and he himself had become a laughingstock, all because of Jessica. And now, not only had she betrayed him with another man, but she was dragging his sister's name through the mud. No wonder Anna had refused to forgive him. She must have seen these lies too, and perhaps thought he had benefited from them. Eyes bloodshot, cornered like a beast, Ethan downed several bottles of whiskey before storming toward the recording set of Jessica's latest book promotion. The vanity room glowed under bright LED lights, making Jessica's face appear pale as porcelain. She leaned toward the mirror, carefully applying a fresh shade of lipstick. Her phone screen lit up with the joyous announcement: her new book had sold over 1 million copies. Suddenly, the door slammed open with a crash that rattled the powder compact off the counter. Ethan, reeking of alcohol, burst in like a man possessed. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse with fury. "Jessica, how dare you!" Liam's bodyguards immediately restrained him, forcing him back. But Ethan struggled, his hands fumbling toward the vanity table as though ready to strike. Jessica instinctively raised her arms to shield herself, but in the chaos she stumbled, her arm twisting painfully. Her scream pierced the room, raw and panicked. Liam strode in, his polished shoes striking hard against the floor as he took control of the situation. The bodyguard subdued Ethan fully, pinning him down. Jessica, clutching her injured arm, stared at Ethan with wide, tear-filled eyes. Her sobs shook the dressing room, a mix of pain, disbelief, and despair. "I hate you, Ethan." After being rushed to the ER, the doctors diagnosed Jessica with multiple compound fractures in both arms and joints, which had triggered a severe infection leading to sepsis. Their advice was clear: if she wanted to live, she had to undergo amputation. Jessica resisted desperately, but Liam Moreau pulled every string he could. He held her hand and whispered, "Even if you're disabled, I'll still love you. What matters most is that you live. After the surgery, we'll get married." At the same time, Liam filed charges. Ethan was detained for intentional assault causing grievous injury. Liam was quickly cleared under the grounds of self-defense, and by proposing to Jessica despite her impending disability, he gained public praise as a devoted man who stood by her through tragedy. These events sent Jessica's book sales soaring, while Liam rose 3 ranks within his company. But once the wedding was over, reality proved different. Jessica lived shut away in a luxury apartment, while Liam returned only once every few days. Standing by the window with the light casting him in silhouette, he would bring a few beautiful assistants and leave Jessica with soft but cold reminders. Keep writing. The manuscript is due by the end of the month. Otherwise, you won't see a dime of living expenses. Then he would turn and leave. Inside, a group of young staff hovered around Jessica, calling her Author Jessica, and urging her to hurry and produce more chapters. Jessica looked at herself in the mirror, her pale and exhausted face streaked with lines of pain. Her thoughts drifted to her own novel's tragic heroine, the disabled ballerina doomed to spend her final years alone in a wheelchair. Slowly, her reflection and the image of that character overlapped until they were one. On my side, I lifted a cup of still warm tea on the terrace and took a slow sip. The gentle warmth slid down my throat, calming and steadying me. In the distance, the neon of the city glimmered under the night sky like a river of shifting stars. Beneath my feet stretched the vast estate that belonged to my mother and me. Serene, solid, unshakable. My mother's hand came to rest lightly yet firmly on my shoulder, steady and warm. "It's all over now," she said softly. I looked out into the night and allowed a faint smile to touch my lips. My eyes carried a calm and release I had never known since being reborn. "No, Mom," I replied, my voice quiet but filled with a strength breaking free from its cocoon. "This is a new beginning." Under the spotlight, my white ballet dress flared into the most graceful arc. My toes pressed firmly against the center of the stage, like a snow lotus blooming proudly after enduring storms and frost. Thunderous applause roared from below. Countless flashes merged into a sea of light. How perfect. This time, my life did not end under their accusations. This time, I was the one to close the curtain, and the one to open it grandly again.